take good notes, there will be a quiz afterwards.
Ooh.
And if you're on faculty here, you start with a minus 50. So you gotta do twice as good, just so that you know. My name's Katie Sprinkle. I am answering the door. Doing good, how are you? Well, now I know why they don't have doormen anymore, because I didn't get a single gratuity.
Got my smile.
That won't pay my rent, dear, sorry.
Or mine.
But we're giving it the college try though, right? Anyway, my name's Katie Sprinkle. I'm an attorney here in Dallas. I'm gonna give you a little background on me, just so that you know who I am. And then we'll jump into the topic. What I'm gonna try to do is talk for a little bit, and then shut up and throw it out for questions. I spent a lot of years sitting in chairs, listening to people like me come in and yap, and was always hopeful that they would talk about what I wanted them to talk about, and they never did. So I figure the easiest way to avoid that is talk about what you want to talk about, and the way to do that is just let you ask questions. So, first of all, I was born in Dallas, grew up in Irving, went to high school at Irving High School, spent 2 years in community college. I then transferred here, and I graduated from here in 1990, back when an iPad was a stone tablet and a chisel. And then after I graduated, I went to St. Mary's Law School down in San Antonio and graduated in 1993. Took the bar exam in 1993 and passed. Got licensed in November of 1993. I spent the first couple of years working for a couple of small firms doing some personal injury stuff, aka ambulance chasing. Shh. Did mostly criminal defense, and then I went to work for the Dallas County Public Defender's Office. I spent 14 years as a public defender here in Dallas County. Then I went to Burnett County. The rest of the English-speaking world says Burnett County. It's Central Texas. They say Burnett County. I actually said, excuse me? They said, it's not Burnett, it's Burnett, as in burn it, darn it. Okay, so I spent 2 years there helping establish a new public defender's office. Then I left there in 2013, came back to Dallas, started my own practice. I still do criminal defense work, but I also help the transgender community update their name and gender marker on their legal documents, which is what I'm going to talk to y'all about today. The process itself can be daunting if you're not familiar with it. I've done a couple of hundred of them, so I can almost do them in my sleep. So basically, when people call me to talk about updating their legal documents, we talk generally about where they are in the process. Because where you are sort of determines timing. And a lot of it has to do with just timing. Obviously, you don't want to have your legal documents changed too early, although lots of people do it too late, but there is no such thing as too late. If you time it right, you can avoid the, can I see your driver's license? Man? So yeah, it can be very daunting when you've made the physical transition and your IDs don't match, or for a while I was living in two worlds. I was girl on weekend, ugly boy during week. And that can make it difficult. So getting your IDs updated, there's always going to be a period of time where it's either too soon or not soon enough. But to begin the process, you need to at least have medical transition ongoing. So what does that mean? Means you have at least seen a therapist. A lot of therapists still want to see you for at least 3 months, and then they'll write you a letter. That letter will basically be a recommendation to your doctor so that you can begin taking the appropriate hormones for you. So you literally take the letter, you go to the doctor, you say, here you go. The doctor will look at it and then prescribe the appropriate medication for you. As a trans woman, I took estrogen and some medication called spirolactone, which inhibits testosterone production in the body so that the estrogen is unopposed in the system. Now, I transitioned later in life, so the earlier you can do it, some of the side effects, I call them if testosterone, won't kick in. The beard, that's sort of the biggest nightmare for most of us, because just because you start taking estrogen, it doesn't go away. You get to go get that removed, which is a whole lot of fun and really expensive, and just about that painful. So hardly just a tickle. The hard part now is the waiting game. Guess what? Second puberty. Yay! It was so much fun the first time. And just like the first time, it's not real fast. It takes a while. Now, what we'd like to see before we begin the legal process is about 6 months. Because something happens at 6 months. Your doctor will do blood work. And this is where you're looking to see if there are any physical complications happening because of the hormones. Particularly on estrogen. Estrogen can irritate the liver. It can cause blood pressure changes. Testosterone can cause blood pressure changes, cholesterol changes. So the doctors will generally do blood work about every 6 months. If there's an issue, they will do the blood work a little more often. But at some point, they'll dial that in, and you'll get a dosage that is working for you. So that usually happens around 6 months. Now, if they're still tinkering, some of the doctors aren't going to write you the letter until they're done tinkering with your doses. They want to make sure that your medication is at a stable level. And then at that point, then we can initiate the legal process. Now, the legal process in Dallas County takes about 2 months. The first thing that has to happen is we file some documentation with the court. It's called a petition. And that petition basically creates the case. And it's asking the court to provide a court order that will allow us to change the name and correct the gender marker on all the legal documents. So all court cases, an auto accident, doesn't matter, divorce, they all start with a petition because you're petitioning the court to make some changes. In our case, it just so happens to be a name and a gender marker. So we file that petition. Now in Dallas County, the local practice is we want a background check. I don't. I'm fine if they go without it. It's actually not required by state law, but the local practice is to go ahead and get one. They're mainly looking for criminal history. Criminal history by itself doesn't bar someone from getting their gender marker. I get this question all the time. I've got an unpaid ticket somewhere. I don't even know where. Is that going to interfere with this? No, it is not. What they're looking for are felony convictions. You've been to prison before. And they just need to make sure enough time has gone by between the time that you were released from custody or probation or supervision, and the statute says 2 years. So if you got out of prison 5 years ago, did 4 years on parole, you've been off parole for a year, you got another year to go, then you can petition the court. Of course, young people generally don't have that kind of criminal history, and there's nothing on their criminal history. Now, the way we get a background check done is because you're requesting a court order for a gender marker correction. You can go to local law enforcement. Sometimes campus police agencies will do it. They do 2 sets of fingerprint cards for you. I always tell people get 3 sets just so that you have a backup. Because a couple of courts want them, and every once in a while they get smudged because it is just ink on a card. And DPS will send you a little note in the mail that says, we couldn't read your fingerprint card, need a new one. Well, then you've got one. It's your backup. So then you just send it to them and you're good. Usually takes DPS about a month. Because you're having a legal proceeding done, a name change, DPS runs the background checks, and what they do is they send the results to the court. So I don't get them, you don't get them, the court gets them. And they're sealed, so nobody but the judge can view them. And if you go down and ask for a copy of them, they will not give them to you. That's how protective they are, because the information contained in one of those background checks is a identity thief's drain. So they seal those so nobody gets to see those. Even you. You can go down there and beg and throw a hissy fit, not gonna matter. They're just not gonna give it to you. So that goes back to the court. Then we can schedule a hearing to get in front of the judge. I try to schedule with your schedules, but the court dictates the schedule. So I call the court and say, I need to try to avoid, a Tuesday or something like that, and then the court gives me a Thursday. Sometimes I'll call and say I need to avoid Mondays, and then they schedule me for a Monday. It happens, and it doesn't matter how much. I've actually had to go down and talk to the judge. Any way I can get you to do this on a Thursday or a Friday. Every once in a while, I have some success doing that. So the scheduling, I call and request something, and then the court gives me what they have available. So then what will happen is we'll meet at the courthouse. If it's me, I send you an email exactly where to go. Then we meet just outside the courtroom. We go over testimony. It's very short and sweet. You spend more time waiting your turn to see the judge than you do actually in front of the judge. Now, there are a couple of judges that are a little on the chatty side. So if you get in front of one of them, I usually give you the heads up. Okay, this judge is super nice, but she's a little on the chatty side. So here's what she's going to say. So, tell me a little bit about yourself. And so then I'm like, okay, if you're in school, tell her what you're studying and what you want to be when you grow up. Then just stop. And that works beautifully. Some of the judges are very nice, but they got other stuff to do. So they don't want to talk to us very much. They're just like, okay, do your thing. All right, here, get out of my courtroom. They're not being mean, they just got other stuff going on. I can do one of these in less than 2 minutes, which is why the judges like when I show up on one of these, because nobody's fumbling around looking for paperwork. I've usually got it all down because I know what each judge likes and doesn't like. So what do you get asked when you go in front of a judge? I tell everybody the hardest question that you have to answer is the very first one, because it has the longest answer. And that is, state your name for the court, please. And that's it. The rest of them are yes or no's. You're the petitioner in this name change with gender marker correction case. Yes. The reason that you're asking that your name be changed and your gender marker be corrected is that you have undertaken the necessary medical treatment for gender transition. Yes. It's part of your petition. We've supplied to the court 2 letters, one from a doctor, one from a therapist, attesting to the necessary medical treatment that you have undertaken. When I supplied that to the court, did I have your permission to do so? Yes. Now you understand you cannot change your name in order to escape criminal history, criminal liability, civil liability, or legal obligations that you owe. Yes. You understand you cannot change your name in order to perpetrate a fraud on anyone. Yes. You're not attempting to do any of those things. No. Have you ever been convicted of a felony offense in this state, any other state, or any federal court in the United States? No. Are you under a legal obligation to register as a sex offender? No. Would you like to be? That's just a little joke that I play on people. Gets people to smile and helps them relax a little bit. The last question's the easiest. Do you believe it to be in your best interest and the best interest of society that the judge grant your petition and sign your order today? Yes. Boom. Judge signs your order and out the door we go. Most people get confused by this. You never walk out of court with an original judge's signature. You always go to the clerk's office and make you a certified copy, and that's what you get. You never leave the courthouse with an original judge's signature. One, it's against the law, and two, if it doesn't get filed in the clerk's office, it's like it never happened. So you always go to the clerk's office, give them the original. Now most of the judges know me, so they just give it to me because they know I'm going to go turn it in and get the certified copy. For people that either they don't know or that are representing themselves, a lot of times they'll have the bailiff or someone walk the order over because that's how paranoid they are about it. I'm not going to give it to you, sorry. Bailiff, and then you get to walk down the hall with the bailiff, which is always a good luck. And they'll get you the certified copy at that point. Now sometimes what will happen is people don't know to ask for a certified copy. The court's not accustomed to giving certified copies. Most of the time, in most cases, other than these, what's called a conformed copy is sufficient, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a photocopy. But in these, when you go to DPS or Social Security or whomever to get that, they're looking for a certified copy. If you don't have a certified copy, to them it's fake. They want the certified. But that's it. Now, from beginning to end, it usually takes about 2 months. Most of that is spent waiting to get background check results in. Sometimes the background check fingerprint card can't be read, so you have to send in a new one. So sometimes there's a delay. Beginning of the year, usually January, February, DPS is running maintenance on their equipment, so they're a little slower. So different things can happen that slow the process down. And I've had I had one case where we sent 3 sets of fingerprints, and they couldn't read any of them because the person worked in a machine shop for years, and their hands were kind of, it was like gravel. They were just very rough and torn up from years of abuse. And they literally couldn't get a good fingerprint reading using the ink. So we had to send them over to there's an electronic firm that will do it. And they scan your hand and do the fingerprints. Now they still have to print them on a card, but at least when you send them to DPS, they could be read. But the ink just wouldn't work. Well, it took us about 6 months to get that case done just because we couldn't get fingerprint results. In fact, at one point, I went and talked to the judge and said, can we just bypass that? And we're like, no, try the electronics first, and if that doesn't work, then we'll talk about it. So things happen, so sometimes they take a little longer. But the magic document is a certified copy, and that's what, you literally can walk from court that day, go right over to DPS, get yourself a brand new driver's license. You can go over to Social Security. In both places, you'll wait an hour and spend 5 minutes with a human being. And then out the door you go, and then you're done. When you go to get your Social Security redone, you gotta take your old Social Security card with you because they're gonna keep it, and they'll mail you a new one. I asked them if I could keep my old one just for posterity, and they said, nope, we're keeping this puppy, so they kept it. But then you get a brand new one in the mail. The Social Security card itself doesn't have male or female listed on it, but your Social Security file does. And most of the time what they'll do is, they can't give you anything that shows they've changed it. If you ask them, they'll turn their computer screen and sort of point to where they changed it. Now, Social Security does not delete your old information. It's still in their system. So I was opening up a bank account, and the lady was like, okay, we've got to do identity verification. So I had to sign this form so they could tap into Social Security. And then she messing on her computer, and she stopped, she looked at me, and she goes, "Did you change your name?" I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Okay." I said, "Why?" She goes, "Well, it shows in here a different name." I said, "Does it show two names?" She goes, "Yep." I said, "Huh, didn't know that." I don't know that anybody does. But that's how I found out that it's still there. Now, for those of you who were born in Texas, this court order will get your birth certificate fixed. And by fixed, I mean they take your old one, they file it in archives, and they issue a brand new one for you. It's what we call a replacement birth certificate. Different states handle birth certificates differently. There are replacement states, which Texas now is, and there are what's called amendment states, where they will just amend the original document. Bad thing about the amended one is it outs you anytime you have to show a birth certificate. It's actually more work for them to amend it than to just issue a brand new one, which is odd. But I mean, they actually have to work extra hard to kind of mess with you on the amended one. Texas used to, but they streamlined everything, and so now they just issue a new one because it's less work and it's less expensive to do it. And they were already doing it for people who were being adopted, so there was no reason for them to have different rules, and that actually got them in trouble because they used to have different rules for different sets of people. If you were a straight couple doing one thing, you had one set of rules. If you were a gay couple trying to do something, you had a different set of rules. If you were transgender, you had a different set of rules. If you were intersex, you had a different set of rules. And they ran into a little constitutional problem known as equal protection of the law. Different rules don't work, especially when you're segregating groups out, which is what they were doing. So they streamlined all that stuff because it was a nightmare internally for them. And the people doing the work were like, "This is stupid. We shouldn't do this. It should be one set of rules." So then they eventually got around to doing it. So now you can get the replacement done. And even if you had previously had an amended one done, they will go back and they will fix that one. So that is the legal process. Went through it myself, and I've done a couple of hundred of these now. So we do them primarily in Dallas County, because there are only 3 counties in the state where you can routinely get them done: Dallas, Travis, and Bexar County. El Paso is getting there. Houston is working on it. But right now, that's it. 354 counties, and there's 3 you can go to. Now, I went down 2 weeks ago and testified in front of the state legislature because there is a bill, House Bill 2089, that is trying to standardize the method for doing this. Because right now, it's based on the judge that's sitting there and their interpretation of existing law, which basically says virtually nothing. So they're trying to standardize it. The representative who had filed this bill has filed the exact same bill for 20 years. This was the first year it got a hearing. So I went down and testified, gave them some examples of why it's necessary to standardize it. Interestingly enough, the thing that caught their attention the most was if they standardized the process for us, it would bring Texas in line with 30 other states. Would you like to guess what some of those states are? Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas. So we're not talking about New York or California. I mean, we're talking about a lot of states, southern states, that allow you to do it and have a uniform way of doing it. So we are the outliers right now because we don't have a standardized method. So all we're asking them to do is bring us in line with 30 other states. So it's going to get a House vote. We don't know what's going to happen in the Senate, I guess. But, so that's where we are in terms of the status of the current law. They are trying to fix it, standardize it, so it won't matter. You can go to any county in the state. Luckily, the statute is vague enough that you can pretty much go to any county and not have an issue. But right now, you got to go to Dallas, Travis, or Bexar County. So that is what the process is. On the back of the handout, there are some counselors that work with the community. The top of the list is Felicia Porter. She was my therapist. She is the grande dame of transgender therapy in Dallas County. She was doing it back in the late 90s. Renee Baker, who's number 2 on the list, was mentored by Felicia. And then Rebecca has donated so much of her time helping the community. It's not even funny. And of course, Ashley, she works very hard. In fact, Ashley is sort of a contact person for me because she is part of a larger peer group. And so when we've had people that live sort of in outlying areas, we can usually find them somebody, and Ashley's the one that helps with that. But the top 3 they're right here in Dallas. And like I said, I saw Felicia for 6 years. I kind of like therapy though, so I'm a little odd in that thing. So showing up and talking to a therapist once a month was not a bad gig. Eventually I was like, you know, as much as I like doing this, I was taking up a prime Saturday slot. Seniority helps. So I said, well, you know what, I'm gonna let you get this slot away, and if I need to see you, I'll just call and make an appointment and go in. But she was my therapist. She'd been my therapist like 3 years before I asked her for my hormone letter. And she looked at me and she goes, you see this? This is my surprise piece. And I was like, what, you knew at some point I was gonna do this? And she goes, yeah. Yeah. She goes, you were a tough nut to crack. It took me about 6 months to figure it out. But she goes, yeah, I knew. I was like, well, when the hell were you gonna tell me? And she was like, hey, it's not my job to tell you who you are. It's just my job to make sure you get there. So I was like, can't argue with that. Wanted to, but I couldn't. And Felicia's one of those people, I mean, she'll nudge you a little bit. And she and I used to get into arguments. Because, I mean, she was telling me, look, it's there. You want to say it, you just won't. I don't know what you're talking about. You are out of your mind. And I'd walk out of her office so ticked off, I'm never coming back here. A month later, there it was. So, you know, there was some kicking and screaming there. This is not an easy process to start. What I figured out eventually, because I was waiting on a eureka moment, that little bulb to go off in my head going, okay, I must transition. Yes. You know, march on into the nights, the band playing and all that jazz. Discovered that's not what it was at all. It was more of the, how about that? I need to do this. And there was no bells and whistles. It was just sort of this quiet recognition of what I needed to do. And I fought it I was 43 when I started. And I had been fighting it pretty much since I was a student here. And finally, you know, I got tired of battling the depression, the anxiety, the self-loathing, the whole 9 yards. Went through it all. A friend of mine who was he's a drug counselor. I used to work in a drug treatment program back in my public defender days. And we used to do step study. So they would bring in somebody who would teach a different thing about the 12-step program. And the teacher that was in there was talking about the moment of clarity. I'd heard it. I sort of knew intellectually what it was. You know, it's that moment when an addict or an alcoholic realizes that they need help. And so I asked him, his name was Ed, I said, can you explain the moment of clarity to me so that I can really understand it? He goes, sure, no problem. He goes, it's that moment in your life when you can see all the bullshit, but for the first time ever, you can actually smell it. And I was like, got it. And that's what it was like for me. I laid out so much crap to hide who I really was so I didn't have to tell anybody. And one day, I could smell it. And once that realization hit, the rest of it was actually easy. I mean, there were bumps and bruises along the way, but just the self-acceptance was key. I just went, I gotta find a way to make this work, because what I'm doing isn't. And so with that, I will open it up for questions, and then we'll do your quiz. Questions? I'm a lawyer. I can talk all day.
Hey, I have a lot of questions.
Okay. Yes, yes, no, no. Oh, wait a minute. Not those kind of questions. Never mind.
So I guess my first question is if I've already done the name change process, will the gender process be like the same as this? Will I still have to pay that fee and everything?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, I did mine separately too, so I feel your pain. But yeah, you basically, and the gender marker process is almost identical to the name change process. Except that on the name change, you don't have to provide any documentation. The gender marker, you do. The judges are looking to see 2 letters, one from a doctor, one from a therapist. So you get your hormone doctor to write you a letter. Don't let it throw you that your doctor's letter is 2 sentences, because a lot of the doctors, they literally write a letter that is 2 sentences and that's it. Your therapist letter will generally be a paragraph or 2. Felicia's letter is great. It's probably 2 paragraphs. But most of the doctors, I mean, I guess there's a clinic here that does it. Their letter is huge, but there's Amy Wright out in Plano. She writes like a paragraph. Everybody else, you go to the Resource Center clinic, Dr. Daly's office, it's this 2-sentence, I call it the Social Security letter, because the Social Security Administration, when they changed their policy about updating gender markers on Social Security records, put out this letter and said, this is the letter we want. And that's what most doctors use. So don't let it throw you that the doctor's letter is that, but you need those 2 letters on a gender marker where you don't need them on a name change.
How old can they be?
We like to see them within a year.
Okay, and like same with the fingerprints?
Yeah, I mean, if you have old fingerprint cards, you can send them in as long as they're readable. DPS doesn't care. The trick with the fingerprint cards is, are they readable? And I mean, you can have brand new fingerprint cards that just aren't readable. But yeah, the process is the same. There is it's called an affidavit of inability to pay cost. So if you have limited income, you can always try to file a case using an affidavit that says, hey, I'm a student, or I'm just poor and can't afford to pay this filing fee, and it can be waived. There's like this whole affidavit that you fill out and submit. If the clerk's office has a problem with it, if they think you make too much money, they can file an objection. I had one, he was representing himself, but I was helping him. I gave him all my forms. When he had a question, he just called me. And so when he first called me, he's like, I have no money. I said, well, let's just do an affidavit. So I gave him the affidavit, he filled it out, submitted it. Then he called me, he says, hey, I just got this letter in the mail. And it says the clerk's office is going to object because they say I make too much money. And I was like, well, how much do you make? And I was like, yeah, you make too much money. He's like, well, I'm scheduled to see the judge next week. I said, well, when's the protest hearing? Like, a month from now. I was like, go see the judge, see what she does. So the judge is like, if they can't see on the computer that they manage that you're set today, I'm not gonna worry about it. So she just went ahead and did it and waived his fees for it. So that, I mean, the judges, some of them get irked because the clerk's office does stupid stuff. But yeah, limited income, you can do an affidavit and you may be able to get that waived. Now, if you're living with mom and dad are really supporting you and you're on their tax, you know, they write you off as a deduction on their taxes, then mom and dad's income gets tacked in. So if you're, you know, living on your own, you may be able to get some of that waived to avoid that second filing fee. But the filing fee is $300 by itself. So, you know, when you do it separately, you're gonna get double dipped. I recommend that you always do it together, but a lot of times that's just not possible. If you're early in physical transition, but for work or school or whatever, a lot of times you just have to go ahead and do the name and then come back later and do the gender marker.
So I have one more question.
Sure.
The reason I didn't get my gender marker changed the first time was I was worried that it would have complications with my insurance covering a hysterectomy.
And that is a concern. So here, for a long time we talked about that. And then we stopped because under Affordable Care, insurance companies are barred from denying coverage for gender-specific care. So that meant that regardless of what was on your ID, if the doctor said you needed to get it, you got it. Well, of course, with the Great Orange one, they're trying to roll back some of that stuff. And at some point, the concern is that those provisions are going to be rolled back. And in which case, that's gonna happen. I know a lot of guys who did their name changes and just left the gender marker, and we're talking for years, because they were concerned about insurance not paying for the hysterectomy. The bigger concern is if there's a family history and you may need it done for non-transition related reasons. And so in those instances, that it's more important to worry about it. If there's no family history of any uterine problems, ovarian problems, then a lot of those guys just will roll the dice. But you just basically have to kind of look at your situation and decide, do I want to roll with this now? Do I just want to put it on the back burner? We seem to be safe right now from any bathroom bills. So the pressing need that has existed over the last 4 years has subsided somewhat. But that's one of those deals where you just kind of have to decide what's best for you, because that could be a problem. Now, some people have just decided, I'm paying for it, and you know, that's what they do. They just said, screw it, I'm gonna go with the gender marker, and if I have to, I'll pay for it. Others want to see if they can get insurance. More companies are providing coverage for transition-related care, and as that number increases, it may become easier to do it. Because if the company is saying, we're going to cover this, and then their insurance company is saying, no, we're not, a lot of times HR can reach over and say, yeah, it's a transition-related deal, it's covered. But that is a concern. For the girls, not so much. But for the guys, that's a major concern. Come on, I know there's some questions. Come on. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what the process would be if they were internationally adopted or are international?
Should have. I forgot to cover that, even though it was the international department that invited me. Sorry. I'm so fired. So for international students, because the ultimate goal here is to get your birth certificate fixed, because that's sort of where everything starts. Now, once you have a driver's license, social security card, and all that stuff, almost nobody ever sees your birth certificate. But every once in a while, you got to show it. Now, what you have to remember is that if you're not born in the United States, but you immigrated here, your immigration paperwork basically becomes your birth certificate. Because the reason that people have to show their birth certificate typically is to show that they have the legal right to work here. Well, if you're an international traveler, you may be on a tourist visa. Your license to be in this country is because you're a tourist. If you're a student, you're here to attend school. If you're here working, so the different visas determine your legal right to be here. As long as you have a legal right to be here, then a Texas court, if you're residing in Texas, has legal authority over your person. In law, we call that personal jurisdiction. They can control you. That's personal jurisdiction. So as long as you have the legal right to be here, a court has legal jurisdiction over you. So then what our goal isn't to try to change a birth certificate in Australia or Canada or wherever. It's so that you can then take this court order and go get your, whether it's a visa, green card, whatever, documents, your immigration documents, changed. Because once those are up to date, that now functions as your birth certificate. So when you go and need to show proof that you are here legally, that you're legally able to work, that's the document you show. You don't show a birth certificate. Now, the bad news is every country is different. Every state in the United States is different. So if you were born in Kansas, you're not going to be able to fix your birth certificate because they won't let you. And that's Kansas. Well, if you were born in another country, that country may not let you. So I had a friend, she is from Canada, but I can't remember if she's naturalized or not. I think she is. So she changed her name. I did it. I went to court with her and did it. So she got her driver's license and all that stuff done. Then she got her immigration paperwork done, which I believe was her naturalization paperwork. Well, then she realized, I've still got family in Canada. I've still got work records in Canada. I've got school records in Canada. How do I fix all that? I'm like, first thing is pick up the phone. Now her school, they were like, oh, we don't care if it's an American order, just send it to us and we'll update it. So her school was fine with it. She ended up having to get, I think, a Canadian lawyer to get her actual Canadian birth certificate fixed. But she was ultimately able to do it. But there are going to be some countries where you're just not going to be able to do it. But again, if you're staying here, if you're going to become a permanent resident or a citizen, what you're going to fix is that immigration paperwork. And I've done student visas. I've done. I actually did a tourist visa because they just said, yes, I'm here on a visa. Okay. You're going to have to update that. Yeah, I know. And they got it done when they got their visa extended. So, immigration people haven't heard a lot of horror stories out of there. People have been able to do it. The one department where we've heard the horror stories, Veterans Affairs. That's where we've heard the horror stories. Typically, once you change your Social Security stuff, then pretty much that percolates through the federal government. So, I've had people who were 70 years old going through transition, and so when we changed their Social Security information, that took care of their Medicaid and all that stuff. So it filters, except for Veterans Affairs, different computer system. So, and some people fly through with no problem, and others just have fits getting through. So, Veterans Affairs is probably the bigger pain in the butt than immigration. Immigration seems to be doing it. You don't seem to be having any issues there, other than just the typical bureaucracy that goes with it. Yeah.
I think something that you mentioned previously when you were meeting with us is as far as immigration documents, non-immigrants have been successful getting their EAD work authorization cards updated here and their green cards.
Yeah.
So you can get those types of things updated in the US as well, which help you function here in the US.
Right.
Which really is separate from your home country immigration documents that you need to worry about if you're gonna travel back home.
Right, right. And here's where the rubber meets the road. So let's say you're here on an extended visa, but your passport is issued by your home country. They may or may not, depending upon what country it is, update that for you. So if you want to go study abroad, no pun intended, you may be traveling around Europe on whatever passport you have, and it may not be up to date, even though all your American documents are. That's where you run into the headache, is because your passport's issued by your home country. You're just here on a visa. That doesn't change your passport. Now, once you become a legal resident here, and of course get naturalized, some of that's going to change. But so that's where you run into problems there. But in terms of your ability to function here in the United States, having that information corrected will allow you to function here in the United States without those kinds of issues. A friend of mine did one for somebody who ended up being illegal. I was like, well, what documents are you going to change? Because you don't have any. But she did it, and I was like, she called me, she goes, I think I screwed up. I was like, yeah, what? And then she told me, I was like, well, I don't think you screwed up in the sense that you did anything illegal. You just weren't all that helpful. And then as it turns out, the client ended up getting amnesty. And already had the court order. And they accepted it. So, I mean, it ended up working out. And I just had one where the judge kind of threw a fit because he was like, wait a minute, is this person legal here? And the person was trying to do it themselves. So the judge said, no, I don't know. You better call Katie. So she called me, and I was like, looks fine to me. So I called the court and I'm like, just tell judge to do it. Like, no, I think he wants you in here. Okay. I went down there and said, no, judge, it's fine. Here's her letter. She got amnesty. I was like, is that good enough? I'm like, well, of course it's good enough. She just has to be here legally. That's it. It's the only requirement. Okay. So I signed it. So.
What about somebody who is here under DACA? So they don't have an immigration status,
Right.
but they have an EAD card.
Yeah.
So they're not deportable, but so.
They can go ahead and do it because they're here legally.
If they're under DACA.
Right. Now, how long DACA is going to be around is the question. And I haven't had anybody where we've tried to update information for DACA recipients. So, how willing they are to do that, they've been pretty willing to do all the other things. That would be one of those things where it's going to be, that's the lawyer talk. Okay, this may or may not work for you because it's a DACA deal, and that is, unfortunately, if they will solidify it, then I think probably most of the concern will go away. But right now, just because it's one of those things that may or may not exist next week, but again, immigration has been willing to update documents. So my guess is that a DACA recipient would be able to get those documents updated.
Would somebody who is under DACA be able to get the court order?
Yeah, because they are legally here. As long as they have legal status here and have paperwork that needs to be changed, then they can get it done.
Cool.
Yeah, because personal jurisdiction is that. If you're here and you're not going to get deported if a law enforcement agent finds you, then you can get it, and then since the federal government respects most of the court orders, having that court order is what's going to get that paperwork changed. interestingly enough, there are colleges and high school and school districts that won't update your stuff. They do this nonsense of, well, we want the records to reflect who was here at that time. I'm like, okay. And I've had both colleges and like high schools. Now, a lot of y'all are students here. I'm gonna let y'all in a little secret. People who work for the university just the longer you're out of school, the less anybody cares where you went to school. Doesn't really matter. I've been out of college since 1990, coming up on 30. My back just suddenly started hurting. Nobody really cares where I went to school. Y'all weren't all that impressed when I told you I went here. So, but that's the reality. So, I think I have updated, I guess I ought to check. I think I've updated my school records here. I know I did my law school records. One day I'll order new diplomas. I still have ugly old diplomas. One day I guess I'll order new ones. I think I changed my school records here. I'll just have to check. But I haven't changed my high school stuff because nobody cares where I went to high school. I graduated high school in 1986. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to know. I graduated college. That's what they want to know. They don't really care where I went to high school. And now they don't really care where I went to college because I went to law school after that. And now most of the time they don't really care where I went to law school. They just want to know, what have you been doing since you graduated law school? Not getting disbarred. Pretty much that's it. They're not impressed with that answer either, just so that you know. So, yeah. I'm here just for comic relief, y'all.
I heard that for passports you can get your gender marker changed without documentation. Is that?
That's not been my experience. I know people who have been able to get it done with just the doctor's letter. And I've known others that have taken the court order and they wanted to see the doctor's letter. And I've had people go with just the doctor's letter and then had to whip out the court order. You can get your gender marker fixed on your passport. They want some sort of documentation. My wife just had hers done. Now, she hadn't had a passport in like 10 years, but her old passport was pre-transition. So she was concerned about what was going to happen when she went in. And she had to show them her court order and all that stuff. But she got it done. Now, I've never had a passport, so I'm going to be doing mine here soon, just so I can see what happens. See if I'm going to get screwed with in some way. So I'm just going to kind of be the guinea pig and then go do it. I've just been lazy, preferring to sleep late on Saturdays instead of getting up and going to the post office to get the passport done. But I'll eventually get it done and just to test it. But yeah, my experience has been you need some sort of documentation. I've had people who have gotten turned away because all they have was the court order. I tell everybody, when you go get your passport, just take everything with you. Take your court order, take your doctor's letters, and all that stuff. And as long as you do that, when they're pulling out the stuff, hey, I need this, well, here you go, and you've got it. But you're gonna need something. You can try it with just the doctor's letter if you want and see if it works. And the format they want is the same as the Social Security letter. So the letter is not, that letter does not say anything. It's if you've seen one, it's amazing how little is on that letter. But it's also notarized. And it's the letter they want. And so as long as it's identical, they've been doing it. So, but you're gonna need something. If you find a way to do it without it, let me know, but yeah.
Do you have to be a resident of the county that you're petitioning?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, that's what we call venue. Venue is the best place to hear a case. Now, in a lot of cases, there's a venue that's required. Texas, the statute says you may file in the county you reside in. It doesn't say you shall. So most of the judges that hear these take a very liberal approach to the word may versus shall. So no. And once you open yourself up to a county, they gain venue because you're there.
Ah.
So, come on, there's more. Dude, you gotta help me out, gotta give me another question. Nothing? Let's see, let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Do y'all think I skipped anything? I skipped the whole international student part. Had to go back and fill that in.
Sean has something.
Is
Yes.
that fair? Sure. Have you worked with any non-binary clients and seen any like particular?
I have worked with non-binary clients. Most of the time, we end up just doing a name change. Because Texas doesn't have sort of the X gender marker available. So most of the time the decision is, I'm not gonna change it because if at some point Texas decides to become an X gender marker state, then I'll change it then. Now, every once in a while there'll be somebody who is non-binary but identifies more with the opposite gender that they were assigned at birth. Those will go ahead and opt to do a gender marker just because they more identify there, although they don't really, it's not a 50-50 deal. And they just feel like they'll be more comfortable doing that. But yeah, for the non-binary folks, we just don't have a real good solution for those folks right now. And we're still trying to get it where we have a uniform way of changing gender marker. So, that's a whole, and I'll be honest, when I wrote the testimony I was gonna give at the state legislature, as I was waiting my turn, I was editing it, and I opted to drop all the non-binary language out of it because they were having a hard time wrapping their head around the transgender part. And the way that this proposed statute is, although it doesn't add non-binary language in it, it just is creating a more uniform way. Your doctor writes you a letter and you show it to a judge. I mean, that's literally the standard that they're trying to create. It's like, we're not gonna get anywhere on the non-binary with this statute anyway. And since the statute was specific to the trans community, I opted just to leave the rest of it out, so that I didn't lose. And the one guy they said is gonna vote against us actually voted for us. So, which was good.
If anybody thinks of questions they wanna ask you after today, or they're like, oh yeah, I'd love to have Katie represent me in the future, what would be your preferred way for them to contact you?
The first step, the way I work is, I do probably 95% of this through email. But the first step is a phone call, because we can cover all the information that we need to cover during that phone call. Find out what the specific issues are with you, because everybody's a little different, and what issues you may or may not have, because everybody's different. Some have already done their name change, have concerns about the gender marker portion. Some have been on hormones, but they don't know if they've been on hormones long enough. Some may have work issues, so I always say just call me. When in doubt, you can always just call. A lot of people will email and ask if it's okay to call. It's like, sure. Otherwise, just call, and then we'll just chit-chat on the phone for a bit. And then what I'll do is, after we've talked on the phone, when you want to move forward, I've got this little 10-question questionnaire that I just emailed to you. You fill it out and you email it back. That gives me all the information I need to type up your paperwork. I'll type it up, I'll email it back to you, and you proofread it. I'm not the greatest typist in the world. And if there are any changes, I'll make those. And then once we've got the documents, you print it out, sign it in front of a notary, and now your paperwork is all official. And you send it back to me, and I've broken it down into steps, so every step you get an email with instructions on what to do in that step. So I tell people, all the stuff that's on here, you don't have to remember that, because what we're gonna do is break it down into steps. I'll give you this overview, but then we're gonna break it down into steps and just focus on the step that we're on, and it's relatively painless. Right? So, there's a little bit of nervousness that goes with it. When you walk into a courtroom for the first time, if you've never been in a courtroom, you're gonna be scared, you're gonna be nervous. I tell people, I live in a courtroom, and I was scared shitless when I did mine. So, that's normal. If you're not nervous, something's wrong. And whatever's wrong, you might want to share with the rest of us. But yeah, just the easiest way to do it is just call me. If you have a question or just don't feel like comfortable talking in a group, just call me. As you've seen, I'm not the mean ogre.
And
They
Katie
look
will be
like
our
one, but
speaker.
you know.
Will be our speaker at Lavender graduation this